crime stats and the co-response team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and committee members.
I was waiting for this tonight.
All right, so mostly good news on the crime side, unfortunately. If you weren't aware, we lost Shemaya Stewart, a 12-year-old girl, which would count for our statistically first murder of 2025. Obviously, that case is charged. I'm sure the charges will be upgraded to murder shortly, but devastating news for her family, for our public safety family, and for the city, and points to the fact that, too, as I've often said, I feel uncomfortable talking about especially murder victims in terms of statistics. So I think next meeting I'll probably find a different way to characterize our murder statistics. But regardless, moving forward, good news on the auto theft front, as you can see, even lower than pre-pandemic for the year. These are all year-to-date numbers, and I know we have some new individuals sitting on this committee, but many of you heard me talk about the trend before, and back in 2022, you'll see that large spike, which was the Kia and Hyundai sort of viral internet craze, where young people realized that it was extremely easy to steal those cars. We've done some great work on it, not only on the police side of things, working with the companies to make corrections in their ignition systems, and of course, working with the city as a whole to find better, healthier, safer things for our young people to do than to be out engaging in criminal activity. And you can see the numbers speak for themselves of how we're just trending in the absolute right direction, and we hope to keep that up. Robberies, obviously a little bit higher than 2023, which we'd rather be lower, but we don't see any statistical observations in there which would lead us to believe that there's any issues. Same thing with aggravated assault, sort of static. As I was talking, these are numbers, but each one of these represents a human life in our city. We certainly made progress in 2024 compared to years past, and we look forward to continuing making progress. Detectives are doing a phenomenal job. The work that they did over the weekend was just exceptional work on a very difficult case, but that's standard procedure for them. As you can see, we have much higher than the average numbers, and we don't like using the term cold case, because if there's a case that has any sort of investigative activity that's viable that we can be doing, we will be doing. I meet with loved ones of murder victims going as far back as 1999 on a regular basis, and if nothing else, to assure them that as technology changes, as possible of new witnesses come forward, which actually often happens in our business as individuals have life-changing events that cause them to want to bring forward information. We don't consider cases cold. We will do what we can. I believe we're up to 3 recorded fatal overdoses. Sadly, even though it's been very cold and snowy, certainly in winter weather, you see we're recovering more than 1 illegally possessed gun every day of the year so far in 2025. Last time I was here, I believe, Mr. Brown, you and I had a conversation, or maybe it was Pastor Golston. I remember it was from that side of the room. We were talking about the sort of where our fentanyl overdose issues are, and I suggested it was likely citywide. And you can see from the map here, these are our overdoses through December 26th of 2024, so mostly for the whole year of 2024. A large number downtown, more on the southeast side, but it does seem to impact the entire city. You can see with the age group, one interesting thing we saw is that there were no overdose deaths of any individual under 27 years old, which is certainly a little bit surprising and interesting. Males at a 2-to-1 number over females, and as you can see, it's impacting our African American community greater than it's impacting our white community, just on a per capita business, with 14 deaths of African Americans and 16 of white individuals. I have with me Chrissy Rutkowskis, and Daryl Howard. Daryl is a supervisor for the downtown area of our city, and also our co-response team on our side. Chrissy has been, she's an MSW, correct me, and has been since day one with us as our partner from Network 180. Now we have, since the program began in July of 2022, have added 2 more individuals. But this is an extremely forward-thinking program. We're sort of a pioneer in this. Network 180 has been fantastic to work with, and I won't bore you by reading these slides, but you can see the volume of work is there. The culturization of accepting the fact that we are riding with MSWs, with social workers in our cars is a change in the culture of policing, and one that the Grand Rapids Police Department has embraced. I know when I was a young officer and would look to do something out of the ordinary of writing a ticket, making an arrest, I would get scolded by the older, salty veterans. We're not social workers, Eric. And then I would look up the definition of social worker and read it to them, and it's like a person whose job it is to help other people. I'm like, I'm pretty damn sure we're social workers. So we need to embrace that. But the truth is we're not as well trained as amazing people like Chrissy. It's not what she probably thought she was signed up for years ago, a couple years ago, whenever she went through training, because we work odd hours. We work in sometimes extremely difficult conditions. Doesn't matter what the temperature's outside. So we're very thankful for her and our 2 others. But they're here to answer follow-up questions. As I said, the numbers speak for themselves. They're doing amazing work. When they are working, they average 5.8 calls a day. We're talking about calls that a decade ago might have resulted in an individual going to the emergency room, an individual having an EMS response, which will cause the fire department to respond, ambulance to respond, an individual being arrested for something when actually they are just simply out of medication or they are not receiving the treatment that they need. So this is a culture change in policing. We're embracing it, headed in the right direction. Our team is also taking over mental health pickup orders, which used to be done simply by uniformed patrol overs. That began in March of 2024, and they've been very active. And just keeping an eye on Behavioral Health Crisis Center, which is new to our community here. We are the highest utilizers. We've done 92 drop-offs through the year of 2024, and they didn't open until June of 2024. So that's been great. Now it's not just a reactive process that we have. It is also proactive, and that is mentioning the culture. Our officers can specifically observe a need for mental health, and they're out in the community every day on various things. They're best positioned probably of most people in the city to see who could benefit from mental health assistance, and they can simply proactively ask co-response, hey, stop by Eric Winstrom's house. We think he could benefit from your services, and they will do it. So like I said, 5.8 calls a day. They're doing a fantastic job. And I brought them with me in case you have any questions or if anybody else wants to praise them. They're doing a fantastic job out there. And that's it. Open to any questions if you have any.
I've got a whole bunch, but I'll restrain myself for the moment. Anyone else want to go first?
You guys come stand next to me.
All right. Well, sorry. Yeah.
I just had a question. What is the Behavioral Health Crisis Center, and what do they do there?
I think Chrissy would be best positioned to answer that for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me today. So the Behavioral Crisis Center is run through Network 180. It's a 24/7 social work run where if anybody is in any sort of mental health or substance use crisis, they can go there and seek out services. So it's almost like a 24/7 ER for mental health and substance use.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So I know average stay there is about 72 hours. I'm sorry.
that's, yep.
Go, yeah.
No, I know there's questions, but I do want to commend the department as well as Network 180 for embracing this different way of policing. I think it's much needed, and I think obviously what you've shared here has bared that out. I think it can continue to be positive as far as the returns that we're going to get. You know, less calls for ER, EMS, and jail. That's reducing the cost, I believe, well beyond what the investment is, as well as lives and safety and health for our people. So I just want to commend you guys and the rest of your team on doing this, and looking forward to how it continues to go forward.
Thank you.
Here.
So So I know average length of stay in there's about 72 hours, at least that's what I'm hearing. So some quick back of the napkin math means we're using about 1/6 of its capacity at this point. I'm obviously sheriffs are using it too. Do you know offhand, I mean, I know I'm putting you guys on the spot on something you're not directly running, but do you know at what level of capacity is being utilized right now?
So sometimes when we do, kind of sidetrack a little bit, sometimes when we do bring these individuals into the crisis center, they don't always get admitted. Sometimes it's a brief intervention, a safety plan, and then they're good to go. But I think right now they have anywhere between 12 to 14 beds, and it also depends on the level of acuity and kind of who they have on the unit. But they never turn us away, so they're always able to work with us when we bring someone in.
Yeah, I mean, I knew how many beds they had. My question really is, anytime you build a system, if it looks like it's doing what it's supposed to do, the next question is capacity, right? Do you need to scale it up? Do you need to be planning for 24 beds instead of 12? Is it maxed out? So I'm glad to know you guys aren't being turned away, but I would love to know, and again, I can't get county folks in here to give us briefings, but maybe we could find out in the future, like if there are capacity concerns there. And I know the co-response, next thing is I know the co-response team at least had been funded by Network 180, at least in part, correct? Is that still happening, Chief?
Funded by, I missed a word, funded by?
Funded, I thought it was Network 180 that was funding co-response.
Correct,
Really?
yes, yeah, and we've been receiving a lot of grants, state grants and federal grants. The ARPA funding, I know, has paid for quite a bit, yeah, but Network 180, I believe, pays Chrissy's salary. I think she deserves a raise.
Right, so my next question then would be, again, capacity, right? Like if you were building a program for the scale of need you see, do we need to put city resources into it? Because it's great to have somebody else paying for something, but if there's a need, we ought to be in the business of being responsible for servicing our own needs in the community.
Yes, and that is a good question, and I'm not sure, and maybe Chris would be uncomfortable answering this, but in discussions with Network 180, part of the challenge was, especially post-pandemic, was finding individuals who are willing to take the job, because I think we're the funnest group of people to work with, but not everybody agrees, and I think there was some resistance. Individuals who are looking for a 9-to-5 social work job, now you're working all sorts of hours. So we made the commitment where we'll staff up, everyone you give us, we'll pair them with somebody, and we're good to go. I don't know if it's a financial concern, but it's certainly a conversation that I'll have. So since they've been incrementally, we started with 1, then we went to 2, then we went to 3. I'd like to see that number rise, and it may come from a commitment from us.
Great. And again, soapbox thing here, background information. I know that something like 80% of social workers at some point in their career at some point in the year, feel afraid for their safety. And so social workers out in the community in general don't have very good support when they're out doing calls. And so I get that asking them, hey, would you like to do something that sounds even more dangerous, might give you a limited number of hires. But I do want to point out, like, it's a co-response. So these folks aren't going out by themselves, and that's really important, I think. But I also do want to, maybe we should be thinking about training for the folks that do this. I mean, you guys, you train for a living, right? I mean, you never stop training your officers. So maybe there are ways to address. I think that probably concern about safety may not be articulated until someone asks you. It certainly was true when we did the audit at the state level a couple years ago. That 80% number blew me away. Well, we wouldn't have known if we hadn't done a survey, right? The Auditor General asked. The department themselves wasn't asking. So I'd love to have a conversation about how we can make that an attractive job by addressing concerns, not just pay, but I mean, there's a bundle of reasons why people take jobs or don't take jobs, as you well know. So I just wanted to highlight that. Next question I had, if we were building this out, would there be value in follow-up calls? We're seeing this a lot in the 100 and 100 space, that you can move somebody in with their sister, and that's great, and it looks like you solve their housing issues. But if their sister gets sick of them being off their meds after a couple months, then they're homeless again. Similarly, if you're dealing with these folks who have a lot of this is mental health challenges, I assume you don't have the capacity for I mean, often in my experience in the past, and I'm showing my age, but a lot of it is, wellness checks are triggered by an event. They're not, I haven't seen Bob in 30 days. He presented, there was a problem in the house. He had an episode. I mean, so I'm wondering if we want to, if that would be the next step towards doing this work well, would be sort of some ongoing wellness checks that weren't requested, but that we sort of did programmatically.
Yes, sir. I think that would be the next follow-up step. And we have a great relationship with the codes department, and they do a lot of outside-the-box thinking social services, wraparound services to help individuals going through a variety of mental crises. So our codes department's really stepping up and doing that. Like the chief said, we really are building a culture where officers are not only identifying individuals in mental crisis, but also feeling empowered where they should reach out and look for those resources to do long-term solutions. We recognize that it is a small part of the population that needs these resources, and we need to come up with more wraparound solutions to address those. So absolutely, I think long-term solutions for high utilizers is the next step that when manpower allows.
Yeah, and I'm afraid I would disagree that it's a small part of the population. I mean, unfortunately, mental health stats are not great, and they're not trending better, right? And especially as people get more lonely and isolated, that's a component of mental health too. So
Absolutely.
But yes, thanks. One last thing, and I'll drop this. But
I'm sorry, is it okay if I add to that? Just
Yeah.
So part of our job too, as co-response, is providing education, because we are always, as social workers, we're always naturally thinking, this is probably going to happen again, something is going to trigger, whether it's tomorrow or 6 months, so we always provide that education. If in the future something happens, please reach out. We give everybody a Network 180 magnet. I still have many consumers that call me that I even met 2 years ago. So part of our job is also to provide education and the tools for when something does happen down the road. So that is part of our process.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One other random question I had was, I know the HOT team is still out doing its stuff. I went out with them last winter, and I'm wondering, are they referring folks to you guys? Or is that just not really how things roll?
Chief, how about we defer that one to the fire
Okay,
chief, since
okay.
he's directing at least the city resources in partnership with Network 180 on the fire. But,
Great.
all right.
Thanks. So thanks, guys. Chief, can I ask you a couple questions that weren't related to co-response?
Yes, sir.
So I was at mayor's conference a while ago, and very blunt ex-police chief talked about his dark humor was the difference between a homicide and a shooting is marksmanship. Could you perhaps in future start reporting out to us shooting statistics? Because a shooting, I mean, it's a dark way to put it, but I think it's an accurate enough way to put it that might be a useful metric for us to be looking at too.
You are 100% right. In fact, when I got here, we didn't have a mechanism in place for that. All aggravated assaults were aggravated assaults, but we changed our records management system so that there actually is now, the officers actually put shooting, yes, no in there. So we have those numbers. We have done it occasionally at public safety. We'll do it again. I'll make it a regular thing, because you're absolutely right. Yep.
Any other questions?
Well, if others that haven't had a chance to speak, I want to give them a chance. But then, if not, I do have a few comments. So just on that, I appreciate I think this gives credence to, we talk often about social determinants of health, social determinants of education, and the interconnectedness of social determinants of violence. I think this gives credence to the underlying of getting at the root causes of why violence is happening. A little bit about what Mayor, in my opinion, what Mayor is talking about, how our other, and this isn't for you guys, this is probably for everybody, is how can, this proves the case that maybe if resources are diverted or not implemented and to address some of these causes, it should have a direct correlation on the decrease in violence, which I think we all benefit from. And I did have the curiosity around is there a specific tract for this type of social work? Because I do think it could be appealing, and when we talk about police community relations, to get folks interested in this side of things, I think that we may be onto something here to say that, hey, here's another opportunity, so.
Yeah. So unfortunately, there is not. In the past, the NASW has not always been very good about working with police and law enforcement, but that is something that we're trying to change. I have been in contact with some faculty at Grand Valley about presenting on some classes and things like that, so, but not yet, but we're working towards it, so.
And you are trying to reach out to some of those students at Grand Valley to establish partnerships in some capacity due to, I see the influx of all of the cases that you all have had, and we commend you for the partnership in that regard.
Yeah.
Grateful for new dimensions and new ways and ideas to expand the paradigm of quality of care
Yes.
and service.
I have done a couple like lunch and learns with Grand Valley students that are in the social work program right now, talking to them about just kind of bringing that up. And right now I do have an MSW intern at the code office, so
And the current makeup of your co-response team consists of how many individuals?
there's 3 social workers right now, 3 MSWs.
Okay. And 3 officers, correct? Or
Actually,
just the one?
we actually have, and what's great, it's a cultural shift. We have, instead of just a dedicated officer doing it, we've recognized that multiple officers have this skill set of being able to de-escalate and recognize when an individual is in mental crisis. So what we've done is we've opened it up, and we have a very large roster now where the clinicians get to move around, and not only is it their service is to the community, but they also, again, it builds that trust, it builds that culture. And to talk about like building a program moving forward, Chrissy's kind of one of our best advertisements because we accepted her and the culture accepted her and she's done great and the partnership's been great. So she goes back to Network 180 and passes on our good work. And that's kind of our advertisement for recruitment. And I'm happy to see we've gotten 2 more and hopefully more to follow.
And you've done a good job also. I know Paul Smith was also with the program a few years ago as well. But thank you. Thank you for continuing on. Thank you for all that you all do.
Maybe we'll really be onto something if we can get a double major at Grand Valley.
I wanted to share something similarly, just again, what Mr. Golston shared. At Grand Valley, thank you for doing that work and reaching out, but this body has seen several reports from both fire and police where we've done a remarkable job, I think, of getting into the school systems and working with youth. We've done that through partnerships, but we know that it has a long-term effect on our police recruitment. We know that when the police of Grand Rapids are around our community schools, around our children, that we're promoting an opportunity for a profession that they could have as a career. And how can we do something similar in social work? I know it's not as sexy, right? Being a cop is cool when you're 9 years old, but I wanted to be an astronaut or a center fielder. But if we could find programs not only at the college level, but at the high school level in some of our schools, I think it'd be wonderful to say, you don't have to be the person with the badge and the gun. You can be a public servant. We can be a social worker, and it looks very different. So I'd like to see more recruitment, more education about this great opportunity, and we should be celebrating this across our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Don't see any other comments, so thank you, Chief. And thank you, everyone else. Moving on now, I think our next item is briefing from our fire chief. Where's my agenda?
All right, good afternoon. Saw many of you at the MLK breakfast, so it's good to see you just over a week ago. Unfortunately for the city and for the fire department, it hasn't been a great week for us. And I'm going to run you through several major incidents we've had. And since we have some new people sitting up here, I also just want to give you a general overview of what the fire department does, because we still get questioned why a fire truck pulls up when you call for an ambulance. And we do a lot more than simply put out fires. So we'll start out in operations. Deputy Chief Jack Johnson is in charge of our operations division. As you can see by the stats on the slide, the vast majority of our personnel work in operations, and they work 24-hour shifts. So they come in at 7 in the morning, they don't leave till 7 the next morning. We have multiple units running at or over 3,000 runs a year. So they don't get a lot of sleep either. When they go home at the end of their shift, they're exhausted. So we average a 52-hour work week. We have 15 crews in our city right now, 24 hours a day. And once Engine 12 goes in service down in the southeast side this fall, we'll bump it up to 16 units in service every day. We have 2 supervisors on duty. One runs the north end of the city, one runs the south end of the city. Fulton is the line of demarcation for our battalion chiefs. And I'll go into a little more detail in a few minutes, but we also have a program we call CAR 97, which started last year through a pilot program. That's a 24-hour fire inspector and investigator. And I can tell you that position has become invaluable very quickly to our members out in the streets. We do average about 70 emergencies a day. That's 70 incidents, bringing with it about 85 or so apparatus responses. Many of our incidents, one fire truck or engine can handle, but many incidents, as you're going to hear about here soon, take a lot of fire trucks to get on top of. Let me run you through some what I would call unique incidents in our city over the last week. So just for numbers, we ran 553 calls Sunday to Sunday this last week. Out of those 553, we started out last Sunday with a structure fire in the 800 block of Griggs, 1 civilian fatality, 1 firefighter injury, burned ears during the search. 12 apparatus responded with 36 personnel. Now, all those didn't respond immediately. For any structure fire, we send at least 19 people immediately. But given the weather conditions, I believe that one, it was quite cold out. Chief Borson ended up responding in as the duty chief. We have to rotate crews. Our air packs freeze, our gear freezes. It takes more personnel to get through that. That was a slow, smoldering fire. It had been burning for quite a while overnight and actually burned a hole through the second floor down into the first floor. So while we were searching, it was a little tricky to make it through that structure. The next day, we had a passenger vehicle under a semi-trailer during whiteout conditions on the highway. That resulted in 1 civilian fatality. We had 8 apparatus respond with 18 personnel. That was an extrication assignment, so we sent people out there. Ended up finding out the victim was dead on scene, so we had to wait for the medical examiner and then go back out and help extricate that victim. That next morning, we had a medical emergency. It was a passenger vehicle into the wall on 131, and that also resulted in a civilian fatality. No extrication, so that was 3 apparatus and 7 personnel. 1 or 2 of the rigs were trying to provide patient care. That 3rd rig is our blocking unit. The most dangerous thing we do is operate out on the highway. And so we were, almost 13 years ago now, we instituted Utility 2, the dump truck that runs out of MLK Station. We were the first fire department in the country to do that. Since then, dozens of fire departments. It's becoming the norm now to deploy an attenuator behind units out on the highway. So that was that. Let's see, Wednesday, went back to the 500 block of Griggs. This time we had 6 residents trapped in a structure fire. The neighbor called it in. The neighbor was catching children out of the window. The police department was assisting with evacuating residents. We pulled up. We had 14 apparatus and 39 personnel. I actually came in for that when it was -6 degrees when I pulled up. So again, some pretty arduous conditions. We were able to rescue a mom off the porch roof. Unfortunately, 2 days later, she succumbed to her injuries. So that was a fatal fire for us as well. Let's see, 2 days later, we had a premature birth at 72 Sheldon. We worked the patient, but were unsuccessful. So we had 2 apparatus and 6 personnel. So our LaGrave personnel did CPR on that child. Let's see, next day, structure fire at Eastern. That was Saturday morning. Myself and a couple others came in for that. As you know, this one has been well publicized. 4 residents. We ended up with 3 civilian injuries at first, and now, unfortunately, as of last night, a fatality. I will tell you, we had 4 personnel on trucks and rescues, and that allowed us to do multiple searches at the same time. I firmly believe that's why we were able to at least give that child a chance at life. And again, thanks to Helen DeVos Children's Hospital for all their work on that. And then we wrapped up the week with a river rescue response, again in concert with the police department. I think you're seeing a common theme here. Police and fire work hand in hand daily in this city on these emergencies. We went out that night for a person in the river, searched for a couple hours, had the airboat out. That's the only type of boat that can navigate the icy waters in the river at this point, and then ended up calling it that night, went back out the next day again, drones, search teams, and were unable to locate. Presumed deceased, but we don't know. So that was our week. Not to be a downer, but we do experience weeks like that in this city. And I can tell you, having a well-staffed, well-trained, well-managed fire and police department goes a long ways to ensuring those weeks are few and far between. Moving on to our training division, for those of you that haven't been down, I invite you to come down before this goes away. We've been in the Colebrook building just south of Monroe for many decades now. It's been a great spot for us. We lease it from the water department, and down there we deliver our cadet training, recruit training, emergency medical technician training, and regional training classes. And we're going to be moving to our new location at 850 Panel late 2026, very early 2027, and that's really going to open up a lot more opportunities to partner with GRCC and other area higher education places. Emergency medical services. This begs the question, why does a fire truck show up first when I call for an ambulance? Well, 64% of our calls are medical related. We show up first on scene approximately 90% of the time. 90% of the time, we have 3 personnel that jump off the rig and go render life-saving care, maintaining airways, delivering critical drugs, delivering oxygen, getting people out of hazardous conditions, simply the weather, until the private ambulance companies show up. And we do a really good job of that. We do save a lot of lives in this city with our emergency medical program. And we do work very well with our ambulance companies, Life and AMR. Homeless outreach team. Mayor, you had a question on this. Just to give some background, very brief background, this did start during COVID with police and fire. Shortly thereafter, we started to realize a trend once COVID was slowing down, that there was a need for mental health resources and housing. And that's when Network 180 came on board. We are currently exploring moving some of the hot type of work to community development. So we will be bringing forth a presentation next month. But as I can tell you, as we look at this type of work, there's work that the police department's doing right now that's very important. The hot work is very important, but doesn't necessarily need sworn firefighters doing all of it. And then we have a medical outreach component where, again, Network 180 will likely be a part of. So this is a 3-pronged approach to getting social work, Network 180, into our public safety system here in Grand Rapids. And so expect to see some more discussion on that in the near future. But I think that we've kind of leveled off with our effectiveness, and it's time to take another step and take this to the next evolution. Support services, Chief Freeman, Chief Borison, they do a lot of work behind the scenes with recruitment, with hiring. We don't have a problem hiring in Grand Rapids Fire. We had over 840 applications last time we opened, and we're getting ready to open again. Payroll, budgeting, purchasing, and accounts receivable payable. A lot of bills come through when you're managing that amount of people, buildings, and apparatus. Planning. This is what sets the Grand Rapids Fire Department apart from most, is our ability to use data you essentially have an in-house consulting firm in the Grand Rapids Fire Department. Maintain accreditation, our insurance services Class 1 rating, records, strategic planning, and of course, any project management. Community risk reduction, you see them at community development talking about fireworks permits a lot, but they do so much more. Right after I made chief, we were able to implement the 2021 edition of the International Fire Code. We currently have one fire inspector assigned to each ward. We work with the building department to review all new construction plans. We investigate fires. I can tell you the 3 fatal fires we had this past week will be months of work for a few of our personnel to button up and work with MSP, police, and ATF. Residential safety. We have been in thousands of homes, installed tens of thousands of smoke alarms as part of our residential safety program. And again, this was something that started back in 2012. Our sworn personnel did it for many, many years, and we got to the point where we didn't have enough capacity, so we pivoted, and now we have an all-civilian wing in fire prevention doing this work. We have 3 civilian contractors that go out and install alarms, a civilian public safety educator, and a civilian special events person. So we have 5 separate civilians working in the fire department doing that work so we can go out and answer the emergency calls. Facilities, we have 18 distinct locations. Currently, we're at 266,000 square foot under roof. I can tell you with an average age approaching 70 years old in our structures, it takes a lot of work to maintain just under 300,000 foot under roof and keep things going. We've had a great relationship with the city finance department and the building department, and they've really helped us increase the quality of our building stock over the last few years. As you know, Kendall Fire Station, Division Fire Station, and the Panel Training Center are underway. And then we are still looking at how do we take care of those stations built pre-1980. That's our line in the sand. If anything built after 1980, we've been able to maintain them well enough that we can keep them going. Anything pre-1980, simply roofs and HVAC isn't enough. We're looking at how do we piece that plan together. Fleet, we maintain over 70 vehicles, a lot of big red trucks, but also a lot of SUVs, cars, and pickup trucks as well. We lease our small fleet through City Motor, and then our big trucks, we work with Fleet as well, and we have a sinking fund. So we pay cash for our vehicles. We don't finance, we don't bond. It's very important that we maintain that ability and that flexibility. And I sent off an article this morning to several city staff. Most of the country is in dire straits right now with purchasing of fire apparatus. There's been a lot of consolidation of manufacturers over the last few years. They have closed plants. Capacity has been decreased. Timelines have been extended to 4 to 5 years for new trucks, and prices are going up. So what we've been able to do is work with a local manufacturer on our upcoming engine purchases right there in Wyoming. And then we buy stock fire trucks off the lot when we need an aerial apparatus with a lead time of 6 to 12 months at most. So we've been able to mitigate what most others are still struggling through. But you're going to see some information if you Google LA Fire. I believe they had 183 fire trucks and 100 were out of service for repair. So these are things that we deal with on a much smaller scale, but know that we're working very hard to stay on top of that. One important note, we currently outsource our fire truck maintenance to a third-party vendor. For years, we had 3 third-party vendors. Then it went down to 2. Now we're down to 1 third-party vendor. All our eggs are in one basket. And I can tell you, as fire chief of the 2nd biggest city in the state, I don't like it. So what we're doing is planning on bringing maintenance back into the fire department once we move out to Panel. We're going to have the space for it, and we're looking at hiring our own mechanics so we can prioritize us and not wait in line behind others. So for our citizens, my fire trucks are the most important on the lot. And then I'll wrap up with emergency management briefly because she's following right behind me. But we did bring emergency management back to the fire department a few years ago, rightfully so. It's a very important program, and I'm not going to steal any of Allison's thunder, but I just want you to know that it would not be possible to effectively plan and manage for these emergencies and environmental impacts without her and her office. So with that, that's the fire department overview in a nutshell. Hopefully you learned a few new things today and certainly open for questions.
Mayor, if I could, going back to your follow-up question earlier on the hot team. So just to be clear, whenever the hot team interacts with community members, with Network 180, they are coordinating with other members of the coalition, the COC, creating case management efforts and tracking community members by name, and are part of this 100 in 100, obviously part of 100 effort. So as the chief has said, while the team, and I can't remember the number of social workers that are
We currently have 3 social workers and peer addiction counselors, and we have 8, Daryl? 8 total?
5.
5? We're 5, okay.
So the two, what the chief has indicated that we would keep the 3 Network 180 staff members and the 2 city staff that are now sworn would become civilian employees, and potentially the 2 firefighters would be returned back to the fire department for operations and staffing. And so right now, from the city is probably one of the more consistent outreach efforts where we're out every day, multiple shifts during the day. What's it, 6 days a week or 5?
Yes. Yep.
6 days a week. And hopefully at some point in the future, there would not be a need for the city to lead that effort, that the outreach teams around the community would be able to staff more consistently like that.
Yeah. I had a specific question about how often things were actually referred to GRPD's co-response folks, but if you don't know the answer to that offhand.
Yeah, I don't have an exact number for you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Anyone else want to have comments, Mr. Brown?
Just real quick, you guys do awesome work. Appreciate that. But one quick question in this, you may not know the answer to this, just piques my interest. You said 1980 is your demarcation as far as the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
What number of those are pre-1980 or square footage, however?
Well, I think we have 5 before 1980 and 6 after.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor, on the hot team, the hot team would be referring more specifically to the other supporting agencies, but when would the GRPD co-response ever get a call with the hot team? How often is it? Yeah, you can come to the mic.
You're on the record.
On the record. We work very closely with Tammy Vincent. She works at Community Builders, and she is fantastic. So we coordinate a lot with her. We work cases together when our resources are needed, and they're brought, and through Deputy Chief Bankhauser as well. When a need arises, they reach out to us, but their social workers are very capable.
So the most often they're coordinating directly with the other agencies more so than the GRPD's co-response.
I just have a brief question, and it might not have made it to your desk yet, Chief, but given the homeless outreach team and the work that's so important, especially during these cold months, last night I received an email through the COCR Continuum of Care about the elimination of federal grant, loan, and financial assistance programs. My work with families with children who experience homelessness, we're currently freaking out right now today as we anticipate no youth homeless prevention monies and putting a 90-day pause on anything and anticipating ICE raids in our shelters, according to the release that came out yesterday, effective 5 o'clock today. And I'm curious what we're doing to prepare for some of those realities coming our way, both in the homeless outreach and in our emergency response that may or may not be federally subsidized currently.
Yep. So the news is hot off the presses. My staff is having discussions today, and it's going to continue. When someone calls 911, we will show up and help them. Outside of that, I don't have any answers whatsoever on the extent of the impact.
Neither do we. I just wanted to make sure.
So thanks. I'm sorry, Mr. Fine.
Thank you. As a witness to the Sunday night river rescue from 280 feet, I just wanted to make a couple comments. One that is obvious to me that there's a very disciplined approach going on because there were several activities going on. It was traffic control, it was boats in the water, and that doesn't happen without the training, practice that's anticipated ahead of time. And it may be expensive, but it is really, on behalf of the citizens, I think, a critical venture. The other thing I appreciated is the follow-up with the media afterwards with the warnings on ice, because that river is very dangerous right now. It changes every single day on knowing where the deep spots are or how thick the ice is. So it was very commendable to watch what I would call a very disciplined approach between the coordination of departments and et cetera, no injuries that I know of, so.
Yeah, thank you. And we've been in the news a lot more than I like recently, so.
Quick question for you, Chief, regarding the getting mechanics in-house. Is that going to be an additional expense, or do you have the resources that are needed for that?
Yes, and.
Okay.
So obviously, if we're bringing mechanics in-house, what I'm paying outside vendors goes down. So it's going to be very similar to cost neutral, and that's what we're looking at. So more important than cost, I know managers focus on cost, more important than cost is the ability to fix my trucks. Because right now I can send a truck out and it sits behind 10 others for 2 months and doesn't get touched. So that's my highest priority. The second priority is doing it in the most cost-effective manner possible. But for us to not be able to respond or not staff the right amount of trucks is unacceptable. And so that's my job as chief, is to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure we can go down that road and answer those calls. Secondarily is, of course, I'm going to be concerned about the finances.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
800 and I think you said 834 applicants last year.
Yeah.
How many did you all hire in that capacity, and what was the key to your recruiting efforts?
So we hired 19. We hired 19 applicants. They actually start next Monday. So we're excited to see them walk through the door. Key for us, in addition to our department and our reputation, has been our lieutenant of recruitment on acting assignment for the last 2 years. First Javon Welch and then Gavin Floyd. They are at events, they're in the community, they're meeting people where they're at, and that's what's getting people through the door. I would say getting non-traditional fire applicants through the door. We're always going to have firefighters from all over the Midwest coming here because we're just good. We're a good place to work, it's a good city. But non-traditional applicants keep increasing each time because of the work we're doing out in the community. Yeah, thank you.
Get something else, Mr. Manager?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the concern that was raised earlier about the notice that you've asked the chief about the pause on federal spending, as that has implications for community programs and city programs as well. And we equally share your concern and are trying to evaluate the impact across the organization and community and figure out how best to proceed in these coming days. So I think, as the chief said, we're all concerned about the impact on not just governmental programs, but community programs and, to your point, community health, safety, and wellness.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And our final item is update on emergency management program.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Allison Froley. I'm the Emergency Management Administrator for the City of Grand Rapids. And as Chief Brown talked about and just kind of where the fire department encompasses, my office with the Office of Emergency Management does sit underneath the fire department. I want to talk about kind of what's been happening over the last 5 years. So I came on board almost 5.5 years ago, which time flies when you're having fun, I guess. It's pretty wild how fast that's gone. A lot of things have happened. But one thing that I did when I first came on board to build this office was to do an assessment on kind of the puzzle pieces that existed, and then also to understand what is missing to develop a baseline emergency management program for the city of Grand Rapids. My goal for this is to show you kind of what was the action items in that and where are we in all those action items, and then what does the next 5 years or so look like. So just as some reminders about how this office was established, and Chief Brown kind of touched on this a little bit. In June of 2018, the city terminated a contract that they had with Kent County for emergency management services. So prior to that, Kent County was overseeing the emergency management services for the city in addition to the county. That movement was done under Chief Lehman after he came on board. And so between the adjustment of that contract and me coming on board in September of 2019, the fire chief took on those duties until I was hired and came here to start this program. One thing I do want to remind everybody is that emergency management is really an all-encompassing type of field, okay? So we look at a variety of different phases between preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. So there's a lot of puzzle pieces to this. I like to talk a lot about it's an onion. There's a lot of layers to it. And it's not just up to the Office of Emergency Management to do this work. It's really a whole community approach to this, right? So building a baseline is a lot, but I will tell you my to-do list and dream list of this office still grows, and it continues every single day to continue the work to really build that resilient community that we want. We've also had a lot of things happen over the last 5 years on top of developing this office and this program. So just a reminder that a lot of this work was happening in the middle of COVID, in the middle of response to riots and severe weather and things like that. That happens, and emergency management's work really can have a focus point, but then also can be distracted due to what is happening in our community and to do that immediate response. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I'm going to pull out a piece of these, the strategy and the action items that I had developed when I came here in 2019. And again, these are very baseline pieces. And up until April of 23, it was just me in this office. Okay, so it was one person office. Thankfully, to a federal grant, we were able to hire an emergency management specialists to do a lot of the public outreach and education and volunteer programs, which you will see in this list have been, we've been able to do that work because of an extra position and that funding. So that if that wasn't there, this work would still have not been done just due to capacity. The bread and butter of an emergency management program sits in our emergency operations plan. And that is the first thing on this list here. That is the first thing that was the to-do of when coming here, was writing an emergency operations plan that's an all hazards plan and whole community plan. The purpose of that is not to give us all the answers on how we do everything when we have disasters, but to give us a framework and some type of strategy on how who's going to come to the table, how do we activate an emergency operations center, what goes into declaring a local emergency, things like that, and having that documented. It is required by the state of Michigan for jurisdictions that have a structured emergency management program to have an emergency operations plan. And so we were able to get that completed within the first 2 years of this program. We're actually coming up to the need to review and update here in the next few months. So this is a thing that gets reviewed and updated every 4 years. The next thing I want to pull out here is our Emergency Operations Center. This is something that we've have primary and a backup location. And looking at this space, it currently sits at the police department. engagement. That is our primary, and needing to, how does this work and to do conducive work when we have an activation. And we've done some work and investment in that space to make sure that we have a room that we can properly bring stakeholders to the table to do good decision-making and information sharing and resource coordination when necessary with that. Also, like I've mentioned, is our public outreach program. So we have Ingrid Shear, who's our current emergency management specialist. And there's a lot that goes into that, and going and working with our community organizations and educating them on how to be more prepared, what are the hazards and concerns they see, and how we work with them on building that education. The other thing too here is we didn't have access to the integrated public alert and warning system, which is otherwise known as IPAWS. So IPAWS, as we have seen before, is an authority that we have here locally that we can push out notifications if there's a tornado warning, a boil water advisory, things like that, that we did not have beforehand, that now we have access to doing that. Going on to the last list of these action items, there were a total of 21 of them. I will tell you that out of 21 of those action items, we've either completed or are working on pretty much all of them that we've started. Here, I want to make note of our emergency action plans that are noted here. So there's multiple avenues that go with this action item. So from a city perspective, city facility perspective, we've worked with a team of other department heads on developing facility emergency action plans. So very much giving guidance on how do employees handle a tornado a warning while they're at work. If there's a fire, how do they evacuate, things like that. So those have been, it says in process, it's because they're completed, but we're continuing to update them because there's a lot of changes happening right now with a lot of our facilities. External communications. We now have a social media presence for the Office of Emergency Management, and we take a lead on pushing out preparedness information, sharing critical information for our community to be able to take effective actions to protect themselves. And this has really become effective in really connecting with our community. We have a little fun with it when we can to make sure that we're getting connections with folks, but also encouraging folks to sign up for our emergency alert system. And different ways of getting verified information on what's actually happening. And then last I want to just pull out here in this list is our Storm Ready community. As you all know, last summer we became a Storm Ready designated city. We are the largest city in the state of Michigan to be considered Storm Ready. And what this does, and what a reminder of what this program is that it shows that we've done certain actions to be storm ready. Doesn't mean that we're ever going to prevent impacts of severe weather, but it means that we have an emergency operations plan. We have a 24/7 warning center, which is our 911 center. We have the IPAWS, an emergency alert system. We do public outreach and education. So all those pieces come together and make sure that we are able to be ready with that. So there's a lot that's happened, a lot of things that are still in process, or it's continuous. And I will say I looked back at this a couple months ago, and I was honestly very proud of the work that we've done and committed in the city. And this seems like a lot. I can tell you right now, this just scratches the surface of what makes a good emergency management office and builds a resilient community. So, there's a lot that we are looking forward to in the next year to 5 years and beyond. We're always pivoting with what's coming and impacting our community. So just a few things as far as what I look at in coordination with the city manager and you all in regards to what comes next now that we've built this baseline. We need to continue to obviously build the capacity in the Office of Emergency Management, right? So make sure that we are able to sustain preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation efforts and continue to go with the growth of our risk level. Right now, we're in the middle of doing what's called a THIRA, or a Threat Hazard Identification Risk Assessment, which we've never done before. And it's an assessment of looking at what are our threats and hazards and what does our stakeholder preparedness look like with with those, and so we have a good area and understanding of where we need to invest to close those gaps. And with that, we're looking to reach out to the community to get their understanding of preparedness, which are coming up here through community preparedness workshops over the next couple months to close out that project. Obviously, there's a lot more support plans that we would like to have and need to work on, and it's a whole community approach. So that list continues to grow and add, and we'll continue to chip away at that and make those support plans happen and train on them and exercise on them as necessary. We'll continue to grow our CERT team. So right now we have a team of 38. We are in the middle of doing another CERT class right now. I believe our class number is about 14 people. So we're excited to have another 14 add to that list and continue that at least twice a year. Again, increasing our training and exercise capabilities with our community stakeholders, but also working with our community as well to continue to grow those capabilities. Always looking at recovery and trying to augment our planning for recovery. That's the longest phase in the emergency management cycle. It's the one that's the hardest. It's the one that's always different, and trying to make sure that we're doing our best to be able to do that better. And then last, as like the fire department, the police department are all accredited, there is an accreditation for emergency management programs. And so hopefully, as we chip away at these things that we would like to have to build our program that are necessary to become accredited, that would be amazing to be able to do that one day as well. So we'll continue to look at that accreditation program and see what we need to be able to build to that capacity. So with that, I will here to answer any questions that you may have in regards to the last 5 years of emergency management.
Great. Any questions, anyone? Yes, Mr. Brown.
I guess it's my day for questions. Again, outstanding work. I just have one question, particularly around the quarterly stakeholder meetings. Just curious on, I don't expect you to have a list or anything right there. Just want to make sure, and maybe even mention this maybe last time you were here, but making sure that we're including everybody, which I'm sure you are, within the community, as we know that sort of like the map that we saw earlier, there are those in particular areas that are more affected or adversely affected in times of emergency. Just curious on what your response is on that.
Sure. So one thing I've learned over my time as being an emergency manager in different jurisdictions is that when we talk about stakeholders, it's different community organizations and other department heads that we work with, and trying to have everybody at the table at least a couple times a year to understand all the things that are happening in the emergency management world. Honestly, I add to that list every single time. The more I connect with folks or realize that we need more certain other people to that list. So it's continuously growing and adding. It is an opportunity for me to connect and to share the work that's being done. So it can be upcoming trainings we're doing, exercises, any type of projects or plans that we're developing, things like that. We talk a lot about current events that are occurring around in our area or the country, and kind of discuss, things that we should be thinking about, because we are not immune to anything here in Grand Rapids, right? And I'm a firm believer in learning from other disasters and other impacts or other communities that have been impacted. So it is definitely something that I think I very much am continuing to add to that list and grow it as needed.
Well, I'm going to refer this gentleman to my right to make sure that.
Sounds good.
I'm sorry, do you have something you want to say, Chief?
No, I just saw out of the 21 action items, the only one that wasn't listed as started was the accreditation piece.
Correct.
And so we look forward to more engagement in that capacity to help you and to assist you in that endeavor. But I'll hold just a question for after this particular report. Thank you.
No, thank you. Not seeing any other questions.
Excellent.
Thanks. And I think, I'm sorry.
I do want to commend, I know all the reports that were given today, and I'm grateful for the Chief Winstrom's stance that was taken in the media as it pertains to immigration. And curious to know if we as a public safety capacity is there anything that's going to be done to assist in that capacity as it pertains to undocumented enforcement when it comes to immigrants?
Sorry, you're asking who?
Public safety. Are we?
You mean is there anything we
as this committee?
I don't anticipate this committee needs to take any action on that. No.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.
Hold on.
Oh, we're not.
I guess
Go ahead.
I guess I'm a little more curious on that. when you say we don't need to take any action on that, what does that look like? What does that mean? I mean, we do have a good, go ahead. I think we need more, at least more response than that.
Yeah, I think Mark can.
Yeah. So I'll start and the mayor can weigh in. I think, so thank you for the question. And the chief has been very clear publicly about GRPD's policy to prioritize safety over status, focus our resources on all the statistics you saw earlier, car theft and violent crimes, and solving those important matters that relate to the public safety of our community. And we want to continue to do that. And we have an existing policy the department's been following since 2019. And I think what we could do is probably share that policy with the Public Safety Committee. Matter of fact, it's in the packet today. In the City Commission packet, it's a report from the manager to the City Commission, and it underscores basically by policy what the police chief has reported on publicly. Chief, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I will simply add that if there's some silence from the police department, it's not because we're not thinking of this. This happens with a lot of things. We're very much aware that this is going on. We have a great relationship with our federal partners. I've been in conversations with the ASAC for West Michigan for ICE. One of the things, since I came up here, one of the things that I mentioned to him was, there's other communities across the country that have reported violence associated with their undocumented communities, and I think that the federal government's focus is going to be on removing violent offenders. At least that's what they've said publicly. And one of the things to celebrate about the city of Grand Rapids is we have a group of undocumented individuals which have very limited amount of contact with the police department, certainly limited amount of negative contact. It's not a high priority of mine to address any specific issues with our undocumented community. So essentially, we haven't seen a violent crime problem here. The violent crime numbers that we're talking about are unrelated specifically to that community. So what we wanted to do, and I think the city manager agrees with this, and the prosecutor agrees with this. Chris Becker has said this publicly too. We want everyone in our whole city to know you got to feel comfortable calling 911. We don't want to turn a victim into a suspect, and so that's, I think, the most important thing to say. So that's why, as I've said publicly, the Grand Rapids Police Department isn't in the immigration enforcement business, and that's all I have to add.
So I appreciate your comment on that, Abby. When I saw that actually made me feel good, warmed my heart, and I appreciate you bringing it up today. And City Manager, I think you said you'll share then with this group what you're going to share there. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So we've had a policy in place since 2019, the police department has, and the city's had a policy in place since 2017, and there's no discussion about altering those policies. So in terms of what this body is doing, there's nothing up for our review or, no discussion about modifying this policy. So that's what I meant when I said there's nothing for this body to do. There's nothing right now for this body to do. And this will be the subject of, in the city manager, commissions are directed him to review that publicly at at the city commission meeting tonight. So that will be generally part of the discussion this evening.
Appreciate that. And as I said at the school board meeting last night, I think times like these, over communication is par for the course. And I think it's best practice to make sure that we over communicate what we have at these times. So, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Now we're adjourned.